We are walking towards a tipping point we never saw coming. A crisis so quiet yet so profound that it could change the course of humanity forever. All over the world, fewer people are having children. For some, it's a conscious decision. Yet for many others, even trying has become increasingly difficult. Birth rates are dropping in record numbers, not only in developing nations, but also in the world's wealthiest and most advanced societies. And if the trend doesn't reverse, the ripple effects will be felt in every corner of our lives. It could reshape economies, cultures, and the way a nation functions. Hello everyone and welcome back to Vander Explains. My name is Vander, and today we're diving deep into one of the most important questions of our time. Why are fertility rates dropping worldwide? And what does this mean for the generations to come? What exactly are the contributing factors causing this decline? We'll unpack all the key reasons behind them so that we can better understand how this global phenomenon affects us in our everyday lives. So, without further ado, let's get started. Let's first start with the basics. We are talking about the decline in global fertility rate, or to be more precise, the TFR, total fertility rate. This rate is defined by the WHO as, quote, the average number of children a hypothetical cohort of women would have at the end of their reproductive period, if they were subject during their whole lives to the fertility rates of a given period and if they were not subject to mortality. In short, it is the average number of children a woman is expected to have over her lifetime based on current birth rates and assuming no deaths occur. Now, according to studies, to maintain a stable population, the magic number is 2.1 children per woman. This makes sense because if a hypothetical man and woman have children, they need to have at least 2 to replace themselves and keep the population steady. The extra 0.1 accounts for factors like childhood mortality and other circumstances, ensuring that the population fully replaces itself over time. Now, let's take a look at what the historical data tells us. As you can see from this chart, the global fertility rate was around 5 in the 1960s. Today, it has dropped to about 2.2 and it's still falling. In fact, in over 130 countries, the rate is already at or below the 2.1 stabilization rate. This quiet shift has been happening for decades. During the 1960s and 70s, much of the world was focused on responding to fears of overpopulation. These worries led to lots of studies, research, and the creation of new policies. And I personally believe it had unintended effects and repercussions that are still felt today. What the world didn't realize at the time was that other hidden factors were quietly taking effect behind the scenes. These powerful factors are driving the drop in fertility in ways we're just trying to figure out today, and I'll explore them later in this video. Back then, experts and leaders were worried that fast population growth could put too much strain on resources and cause serious problems for people. Because of this, there was a big push for research, awareness campaigns, and policies to try to slow down population growth. Take Paul Ehrlich's 1968 book, The Population Bomb. It warned that if population growth wasn't controlled, we'd face mass starvation and environmental disaster. Then in 1974, the United Nations held a major conference all about population control. Because of that, countries like China rolled out the one-child policy in 1979, and places like India started to roll out family planning programs to bring birth rates down. Governments and international groups around the world also put a lot of effort into educating people about family planning and the risks of overpopulation. I even have vivid memories growing up when overpopulation was a big deal. It really shaped how I first thought about families and what the future of the world might look like. Fast forward to today, and the picture is almost the complete opposite. South Korea, one of the richest countries in the world, has a fertility rate of just 0.75. Japan is at 1.2. In North America, The US sits at 1.62 and Canada at 1.5, both below what's needed to keep the population stable. Meanwhile, in the UK and Australia, they're both around 1.6. Over in Europe, Spain's down to 1.3 and Russia's at about 1.4. Brazil is about 1.6, while India is right around 2, but slowly going down. So no matter where you look, the rate is slowly but surely dropping. If this keeps going, we'll see declining populations, aging societies, shrinking workforces, and some big challenges ahead. So earlier I mentioned there are some hidden factors quietly driving fertility rates down. The stuff we don't always hear about in the headlines. Today, I want to walk you through 5 of the biggest ones, starting with something we all feel: economic challenges. When it comes to having kids, money and stability are huge factors, maybe even the biggest for a lot of people today. I mean, think about it. Raising a child isn't necessarily cheap. There's the cost of housing, food, healthcare, education. It all adds up pretty quickly. Let's break down an average American couple's finances to see why this matters. The average post-tax household income in the US is about $80,610, based on the Census Bureau data of 2023. And here's a rough breakdown of how the take-home pay gets spent. Housing, around $20,500 a year on average. Groceries, about $7,800 per year per family of 2 adults. That's roughly $150 per week. Utilities and bills, around $4,500 annually. The cost of having a car, fuel, insurance, maintenance, around $12,300 yearly. Credit card debt or other loan repayments, around $7,000 per year. Healthcare costs, premiums, deductibles, and out-of-pocket expenses, roughly around the $8,000 mark. And there are other essentials and discretionary spending at around $7,000. That will leave, on average, a saving of about $13,460 annually, which comes down to roughly $258 a week saved for a couple. Now, I get that this is just a rough estimate, but it highlights the everyday struggle many face simply to sustain a livelihood. Young adults are stretching themselves thin, relying on savings, credit, or additional income just to cover the basics, let alone consider having children to raise. Now consider this. The cost of raising a child from birth to 18 years in the US costs roughly around $284,000 on average. Now that roughly translates to $15,700 per year per child. When you compare those numbers, it's clear why many couples hesitate to add kids to the mix. It's not just about buying diapers or baby formula. It's planning for nearly 2 decades of expenses. From childcare and education to healthcare and everyday living costs, all while trying to save for emergencies and retirement. Add in job insecurity, rising house prices, student loans, and the slow wage growth many face. And it's no surprise that economic challenges play a huge role in the falling fertility rates we're seeing. So when we talk about declining fertility, economic pressure is a major part of the story. And it's more complicated than just not wanting kids. Alright, the next factor builds on what we just talked about: money and stability. How personal priorities are focusing on one's own well-being and changing the way people think about starting a family. Even just affording a job, a place to live, and feeling stable can be a real challenge for many adults today. So when you add the huge responsibility of raising a child into the mix, it can feel almost impossible. There's this growing mindset among many people, especially younger generations, that they need to be, quote, sorted out financially, emotionally, mentally, before even thinking about having kids, unquote. In fact, a lot of potential parents don't want to bring a child into the world if their own life isn't stable yet. They worry about the hardships a child might face because of their own struggles. Some researchers call this the me first or self-care generation. For some, it might sound selfish, but to me, putting myself in their shoes, I can see where it could come down to survival and sustenance. Study shows that many young adults are delaying parenthood or choosing not to have children because they're prioritizing their own well-being first. And again, it's not just about the money. It's about mental health, career ambitions, travel, personal freedom, and basically, people just want to live fully on their own terms before adding the complexity of having kids. Plus, there's the reality of stress. Studies show that chronic stress can actually impact fertility in both men and women, lowering the chances of conception. So it's understandable that when people feel overwhelmed by their own lives, starting a family can feel like too much to handle. So far, we've talked about money, stability, and personal priorities. But even if someone is emotionally ready and financially stable, there's another set of obstacles that can still get in the way of starting a family. We're talking about biological and environmental factors, the things that directly impact our bodies, often in ways we don't even realize. This includes microplastic, heavily processed foods and drinks, declining air and water quality, and potential exposure to harmful chemicals. Over the past few decades, scientists have raised growing concerns about how modern living is affecting reproductive health. For example, studies have detected microplastics, tiny particles from plastic pollution, not only in the oceans, but inside human blood, lungs, and even placentas. While research is still developing, early findings suggest that these particles can cause inflammation and potentially disrupt hormone regulation, which plays a huge role in fertility. Then there's diet. Highly processed foods and sugary drinks, while convenient, are often loaded with additives, preservatives, and artificial chemicals that can contribute to obesity, metabolic disorders, and hormonal imbalances. And it's not just about what we eat, it is also about what we breathe and drink. Poor air quality, especially in urban areas, have been linked to reduced sperm counts and increased risk of miscarriages. Contaminants in water, like heavy metals or pesticide runoffs, can further add to the equation, loading our bodies with chemicals. And these unhealthy urban living conditions could expose us to endocrine disrupting chemicals, or EDCs for short, that interfere with our hormonal system. What's worrying is that these environmental factors don't just affect individuals who are trying to conceive right now. They may also have long-term generational effects. The air we breathe, the water we drink, even the food we grab from the supermarket can quietly mess with our chances of having kids. And here's the kicker. Even if you dodge all those biological and environmental hurdles, there's another curveball waiting for us in the modern world. Which brings me to the next factor. Isn't it almost ironic? We live in an age where you can meet someone halfway across the globe in literal seconds, yet struggle to have a real conversation with the person sitting right next to you. I mean, think about it. We've got dating apps like Tinder, Bumble, Hinge, and whatever else is trending this month, promising endless opportunities. On paper, it's never been easier to find someone, but here's the reality check. The abundance of choice often makes us less satisfied, not more. Instead of investing in the person right in front of us, we keep swiping left and right, thinking, oh, maybe the next one will be better. And sadly, the data backs it up. A 2023 study published in Computers and Human Behavior found that while online dating has become one of the most common ways couples meet, it hasn't necessarily led to more lasting relationships. people are forming fewer long-term partnerships overall. Relationships, when they happen, doesn't last as long, and many are delaying intimacy or avoiding it altogether. Part of this is because the online dating world turns connection into a numbers game. When you've got hundreds of matches, it can feel like people are replaceable. Commitment starts to look like locking yourself into a decision when there might be quote-unquote better options out there. And when you mix that with ghosting, superficial first impressions, and the fast-paced swipe and scroll culture, well, it's no wonder that people aren't forming long-lasting bonds. Then there's the comfort trap. It's easier than ever to stay home, binge watch something, and chat to people online without putting yourself in real-life situations. Social media gives the illusion of being socially active, but it's often shallow interaction that can't replicate genuine human connection. Over time, this can make dating and relationships feel riskier, scarier, or just exhausting. And the result? We've got a generation that's technically more connected than any before, but emotionally and socially, many feel more isolated than ever. And if people are already finding it harder to build deep, lasting relationships, it naturally follows that fewer are taking the plunge into marriage or starting a family. But this tech-driven shift is just one piece of the huge puzzle. Because while dating culture has changed, so has the very definition of relationships, family, and what settling down means in a modern context. And that brings us to the next and final factor. The last big piece of the puzzle: how government policies, social support, and changing cultural values all influence whether people decide to have kids or not. Raising children takes serious time, money, and energy. That's why things like paid parental leave, affordable childcare, flexible work arrangements, and accessible healthcare can make a huge difference. Countries with strong family-friendly policies often see higher fertility rates, or at least less of a steep decline. Take Sweden, for example. They offer generous parental leave, subsidized childcare, and flexible work hours. These policies encourage families to have children while balancing work and personal life. Their fertility rate, though still below replacement, is higher than many other European nations. Contrast that with Japan or South Korea, where work culture often means long hours and limited parental leave. Despite their wealth, these countries have some of the lowest fertility rates in the world. But it's not just about policies here. There's a cultural shift happening too. Being child-free is becoming more accepted, and people are rethinking traditional family roles. The rise of emerging adulthood means that more young people are delaying marriage, career settling, and parenthood to focus on education, travel, and personal growth. So while government support can help ease the challenges of parenthood, the bigger story might be how we as a society are redefining what it means to build a family or not. And the bigger question is, what happens next? And what are the consequences of global drop in TFR? And can we actually turn this trend around? The consequences of low fertility rates are massive, and they're already hitting many countries hard. When fewer babies are born, populations start shrinking and aging. This shift creates real problems for economies, healthcare, and communities worldwide. Economies slow down because fewer workers mean less productivity and innovation. For example, the International Monetary Fund has warned that population decline could reduce economic growth significantly in many developed nations over the next few decades. Pension systems are facing a huge strain, with fewer young people paying into the system and more retirees drawing benefits, countries like Italy and Japan are already grappling with huge deficits in their pension funds. Healthcare systems struggle too. The World Health Organization reports that aging population increased demand for healthcare services, but labor shortages in healthcare professions means fewer doctors and nurses are available to meet that need. In rural areas, these trends are especially harsh. Towns shrink, schools closes, and sometimes entire regions risk becoming ghost towns. Eastern European countries like Bulgaria and Romania are seeing rural depopulation on a worrying scale. If these trends continue unchecked, some studies predict that countries such as Japan, South Korea, and even parts of Europe could see their populations halved by the end of the century. So, what are governments doing about it? Across the globe, many have introduced pro-natalist policies aimed at encouraging families to have more children. These include monthly child allowances, paid parental leave, subsidized or free childcare, and fertility treatment support. Countries like Sweden and France have some of the most generous family policies, and while these have helped slow down fertility decline, they haven't exactly reversed it. However, some countries go further. Hungary, for example, offers cash bonuses and tax breaks for families, and Russia has experimented with maternity capital programs that provide financial incentives for having a second or third child. But despite all these efforts, research shows that even with strong policies, fertility rates in many places have kept falling or stayed below the magic 2.1 replacement level. Why? Because this is about so much more than just money. It's about mindset, how people see family, career, and personal freedom. It's about biology, things like declining sperm counts, delayed childbearing, and even environmental factors. It's also about society, shifting cultural values, technology reshaping relationships, and the way we connect with each other. And finally, it's also about lifestyle, the economic pressures, work demands, and health concerns we've just talked about earlier. But here's the thing, this isn't all doom and gloom. There are plenty of places in the world that have no problem maintaining healthy fertility rates. Many countries in Africa, and even some in the Middle East, are well above the 2.1 stabilization rate. While I haven't gone deep into them here, maybe it's time that the rest of the world started ripping a page out of their playbook. Whether that's about community structures, extended family support, or cultural attitudes that genuinely value having children. The solution isn't going to be simple. It's going to be just as complex as the problem we've made. Mixing advances in medical technology, smarter social and workplace policies, and a genuine cultural shift that makes raising a family feel not only possible, but also rewarding. There's no magic overnight fix, but there is hope. With the right blend of science, policy, and community spirit, we as a humanity can adapt, and maybe even thrive in this new demographic landscape. So there you have it, a deep dive into why fertility rates are dropping around the world, and what that means for our future. We looked at the big picture, from the early scare of overpopulation decades ago to the complex economic pressures people face today, all while breaking down the 5 big factors driving today's fertility decline. Now I want to hear from you. Has this video made you think differently about family, society, or your own future? Do you see fertility shifts as a problem, an opportunity, or perhaps something else entirely? Drop your thoughts and questions in the comments below, and let's get a real conversation going. Thanks for watching, and as always, if you found this video interesting, hit that like button, share it with your friends, and consider subscribing to the channel. For now, this is Vander, stay safe, and I'll see you on the next one.